All right, so tonight we're discussing chapter 9, which deals with survey research design. Chapter 9. So in this chapter, the chapter talked about mail surveys, online surveys, design and planning issues, pilot testing, data collection, measurement error, measures of reliability, and interview methods. I don't know what type of design you're going to use, but anyway, if it involves survey, this should be of interest to you. So in this lecture, we're going to explain the purposes of survey research. We're going to discuss the 6 steps in a survey research design. What is the difference between cross-sectional and longitudinal designs? We're going to talk about the advantages and disadvantages of different survey data collection methods, constructing and refining a survey instrument. Also, provide explanations on how to select a survey sample and describe how to prepare survey data for analysis.
I found this on the web.
Sorry about that. So what is a survey research? Well, survey research involves collecting data to test hypotheses or to answer questions about people's opinions on some problem or issue, right? A survey is an instrument. Remember, I talked about using a survey instrument. A survey is considered an instrument to collect data that describe one or more characteristics of a specific population. Now, survey research can be used to gather information about a group's beliefs, their attitudes, behaviors, and also demographic composition, but yet so many more. Now, survey data are collected by asking members of a population a set of questions, which can be administered in a questionnaire that is either mailed or emailed. But of course, we know today most surveys are emailed, or they will actually post them on social media. Okay. Now, although conducting survey research may sound fairly straightforward, there is considerably more to it than just asking questions and reporting answers. Definitely more to consider. Survey studies often suffer from lack of participant response. How many of you have received surveys and like, oh my goodness, not another survey? You know, I don't like completing surveys unless there's some incentive for me completing it. Otherwise, I just disregard it. Now, survey studies often, like I said, suffer from, participants' response. Now, many potential participants do not return mail questionnaire or attend scheduled interviews. There are still some companies today that will actually mail questionnaires. Okay. However, this limited sample can skew data and make it difficult for the researcher to draw accurate conclusions from the study, especially if non-respondents feel or act differently than people who did not respond, or if a particular subgroup of the population is unrepresented. Now, the purposes of survey research. Now, survey and research serves multiple purposes, primarily aiming to gather specific information or opinions from a targeted population. Now, these structured questionnaires or interviews help researchers collect data on various topics ranging from attitudes and opinions to behaviors and preferences. Now, surveys enable the exploration of relationship between variables, the identification of trends or patterns within a population, and the generation of insights for decision-making or hypothesis testing. Now, surveys, they provide both quantitative and qualitative data, okay? Surveys provide quantitative or qualitative data that aid in understanding social, psychological, or behavioral phenomena, allowing us as researchers to draw conclusions, allowing us to make comparisons or validate hypotheses within the study domains. Now, additionally, surveys often offer a cost-effective and efficient means of collecting data from large and diverse populations. Steps in survey research. I'm going to discuss or define objectives and research questions, select a survey method, design a survey, identify and recruit participants. These are the first 4 of 9, I believe, that I have listed. But anyway, conducting surveys and research involves several key steps to ensure the collection of reliable and valid data. The first one you see is define objectives and research questions. That's the very first step when you're going to collect or implement a survey for your research. You have to define the objectives and your research questions. And this is where you clearly outline the goals of the survey and the specific information needed to address the research questions. Select a survey method. Here you're going to determine, this is when you're going to determine the appropriate survey method based on the research objectives and your target population. The next step is you're going to design the survey. This is where you develop a survey instrument, which could be a questionnaire, or it could be an interview script. And of course, whenever you're conducting a survey, even if you're not conducting a survey, but you're interviewing participants for your study, you must have the same questions. They have to be consistent, okay? So when you design the survey, you will be developing the survey instrument, which I said is either the questionnaire or an interview script. Carefully, you're going to ensure clarity. You're going to make sure the survey is relevant, and you have proper formatting of questions to elicit accurate responses. The next step, identify and recruit participants. Here, at this step, you're going to define your target population, and you're going to select a sample from that population that represents your research target. You're going to use appropriate sampling techniques to ensure the sample's representativeness and reduce bias. The next step, identify and recruit participants. At this stage, you're going to define the target population, and you're going to select a sample that represents it. You're going to use appropriate sampling techniques to ensure the sample's representativeness and also reduce biases. You want to make sure of that. The next step, administer the survey. You're going to implement the survey by distributing questionnaires, conducting interviews, or administering online surveys. You're going to provide clear instructions and ensure accessibility for your participants. Data collection, you're going to gather responses systematically, ensuring accuracy and also consistency. You're going to monitor the data collection process to maintain quality and completeness of responses. Here at this stage, which is called the data cleaning and analysis, you're going to clean the collected data by checking for errors. You're going to be checking for inconsistencies or even missing information. Then you're going to perform the appropriate statistical or qualitative analysis based on the survey design and your research objectives. The next stage is the interpretation and reporting. Here, you're going to analyze the survey findings in the context of the research objectives. You're going to interpret the results. You're going to draw conclusions, and you're going to relate them back to your initial research questions. And the next step here is consider ethical consideration. You're going to ensure that ethical guidelines and standards for research involving human participants are followed throughout the survey. You're going to make sure that the ethical guidelines and standards for research involving human participants are followed throughout the survey process, including informed consent and confidentiality. So anytime that you're going to interview your participants, you must have their consent, a written consent. Even if you're administering a survey using, I'm trying to think, SurveyMonkey, yes, that's the first one that comes to mind. You have to have a written consent embedded in your survey that the participant is willing to answer your survey or respond to your survey, and you're acknowledging that the information that you gather will be confidential. Okay. So survey research designs. And remember, I talked about the cross-sectional and the longitudinal surveys. Now, survey studies generally come into one of two designs, the cross-sectional and the longitudinal studies. Now, the key difference between these two types is the number of times the survey is administered. In cross-sectional surveys or studies, a survey is administered to a population once. In the longitudinal survey or studies, the surveys are administered to a population more than once, okay, with significant periods of time elapsing between each administration of the survey. So, for example, a cross-sectional, you're only going to be administering the survey once. In other words, the information that you receive from that survey will be all that you need, okay? The longitudinal, I would say, is someone conducting a research, say they want to know, trying to think. It's done over a period of time, okay? Maybe they want to conduct a survey on with participants during the first 6 months. And then they want to use those same participants and find out, the difference. I mean, what transpired during that first 6 months that is somewhat different from the next 6 months. And then they're going to use the first 6 months data and the second data and compare them. Okay, that's the difference between a cross-sectional and a longitudinal survey. If you're going to conduct a survey for capstone, you definitely want to stick with the cross-sectional, because one, they're more effective for providing a snapshot of the participants' behaviors, their attitudes, their beliefs in a population. Okay, now this design, the cross-sectional design, also has the advantage of providing data relatively quickly. You don't have to wait for years or for months, like I stated earlier. I would say most of the time the longitudinal surveys are usually done in clinical studies, Okay, specialized methods for collecting survey data. Now, survey research requires the collection of standardized, quantifiable information from all members of a population or of a sample. Now, to obtain comparable data from all participants, the researcher must ask them each the same question, like I stated earlier. They have to be consistent. Now, surveys generally take one of two forms, like I said, a questionnaire or interviews. You can have the face-to-face interview, a telephone interview, mail questionnaires, group administered questionnaires, and also the electronic questionnaires. Now, an important decision faced by all survey researchers is choosing the method for collecting data. I believe the book mentions 6 approaches: your mail, the US mail, the email, the web-based, the telephone, personal administration, interviews. Okay. You definitely don't want to stay away from mail surveys. That's, even though it's inexpensive, it will take longer. Your response rate could be small. You don't want to use that approach. Emails, you get faster results. Okay, but some people may take longer to read their emails. So that's another method that you want to stay away from. Telephone, who has the time to call and ask questions? First of all, sometimes people become agitated when someone calls and wants to conduct a survey. So you want to stay away from telephone. Personal administration is efficient when respondents are closely situated, but it can be time consuming. Okay. And then you must have some type of training. Interviews, the advantage of that is that you can probe, you can follow up, you can explain your questions. Sometimes it's usually considered a high return rate. However, it can be very time consuming. Okay. There could be bias, both on the interviewer and the one that's being interviewed. So you want to be careful with that. So I would say the best, if you're going to, for you, when I say you, meaning this class, or for those that want to, conduct your research and you want to get it done as quickly as possible, the best approach I would say is web-based. You get speedy results. easy to target respondents if the email is available. And clicking on a URL provides the researcher with information about the delivery and receipt status of the survey. However, of course, you need the internet. You need the internet. And there are some companies that you can use that will administer the survey for you. You just provide the detailed information as to your population, your target participants that you want to reach, and those companies will just administer those surveys, and you can get those responses within minutes. Pilot testing. Although I'm going to go over this, but I'm not sure if you're going to have time to do it. But anyway, I'll go ahead and explain it. Pilot testing. So before distributing a questionnaire to participants, you want to try it out in a pilot study. Okay, few things are more disconcerting and injurious to a survey than sending out a questionnaire, only to discover that the participants didn't understand the directions or many of the questions. So this is where pilot testing comes in. So when you pilot test, you're pilot testing the questionnaire, and it's going to provide information about the deficiencies and suggestions for improvement. So what you're going to do is you're going to have probably 3 or 4 individuals who will be able to complete the questionnaire for you and help you to identify problems with your questionnaire. And you would want to choose individuals who are thoughtful, those that are going to be critical and similar to the intended research participants. So you want to make sure that the person who's going to assist you is one that you can trust to be honest and critical with you, will be able to do that. Okay, so how do you select a survey sample? Many ways in which a researcher can select participants who will be given the questionnaire is the population. What is a population? The population is the full group of interest to the researcher that the researcher wants to generalize to and from which the sample is collected. When we talk about the sample, a sample is no more than a subset of the population. It is the set of cases or elements selected from the population. And researchers make generalizations about the population based on the sample results. Any questions? I know I'm going a little fast. Sorry about that. But stop me at any time, okay? I hope I'm not muted. No, okay. So advantages and disadvantages of different survey data collection methods. The primary difference between a questionnaire and an interview protocol. With a questionnaire, it's written so that the participants can easily complete it without the aid of anyone. And standardized interview protocol is the instrument that has been put into a script-like format so that the interviewer can systematically read the questions and easily record participants' responses. Interviews are generally preferred to questionnaires because the researcher has more control over the data collection. And again, they can probe the participants for follow-up responses. Whereas with the standardized survey, you're not able to do that. So steps to select survey questions. 1 is you write items to match the research objective. The research proposal will include your research purposes, your questions, and objectives. You're going to construct the items to fulfill your objective. You're going to conduct an extensive review of the literature to identify all areas to cover. Also, you're going to write items that will provide reliable and valid data. Okay, 2, write items that are appropriate and meaningful for the respondents to be surveyed. Okay. So you're going to construct questionnaire items that will work with your particular respondents and need to consider how your participants will view what you write. Principle number 3, write short, simple questions. Your questions should be short, should be clear and precise. And you're going to use simple language and avoid jargons, okay? So the goal is for everyone to easily understand the item. 4, avoid loaded and leading questions. Avoid loaded and leading questions. 5, avoid double-barreled questions. Principle 6, avoid double negatives. Now the double-barreled question, you're gonna ask about 2 or more issues in a single question. So in other words, you want to make sure that you just have one, your question is just simple and it's not where you're asking 2 questions, you know. In other words, it's like, do you agree that the president should focus primary attention on the economy and foreign affairs? That's considered a double-barrel questions. Or do you agree that the US should send money to Iran? That's a double-barrel question. Principle 6, you're going to avoid negative, double negatives. That's when you have a sentence construction that contains 2 negatives. You know, it can easily occur when asking participants whether they agree or disagree with statements. Like, for example, do you agree or disagree with the following question? A county professor should not be allowed to conduct research during their office hours. Do you agree or disagree? That's considered a double negative. Because you're asking the participants to agree or disagree with a statement. Principle 7, open-ended. Determine whether close-ended and open-ended questions are needed. An open-ended question is a question that requires participants to respond in their own words. Close-end, of course, is a question where participants select their answers from a set of predetermined response categories. Principle 8, construct mutually exclusive and exhaustive response categories for close-ended questions. 9, consider the different types of close-end response categories, rating scales. 10, use multiple items to measure complex or abstract construction. 11, make sure the questionnaire is easy to use from the beginning to the end. And principle 7, pilot test the questionnaire until it is perfected. So if you're using a validated survey from a research, then you could seek permission from publisher and use their survey. If you want to use a survey that's in a research in a study, you have to seek permission from the publisher to use that survey. You just can't go ahead and, okay, I can use the survey from this study here for my research. No, you can't do that. You have to have permission. You have to request permission. And then when you submit your research to your professor, you have to provide a copy of that permission with your research. Preparing and analyzing survey data. If you're going to conduct a survey, of course, you're going to need some way of at how to analyze it, how you're going to collect it, And there are many, many softwares out there that you can use. One, for example, is SPSS. It's basically almost like an Excel spreadsheet. Okay. Quantitative data is easy to analyze when you use this system, SPSS. You can carefully check the quality of your data. I mean, depending on your survey, depending on your research, this software would be excellent to use. Okay. The easiest way to tabulate questionnaire responses is to have participants mark responses to closed-end questions on a scannable answer sheet. Now, if your questionnaire contains open-ended questions, you would need to code those answers according to patterns in the responses provided. So the simplest way to present the results is to indicate the percentage of respondents who have selected each alternative for each item, for each question. However, analyzing some item clusters or groups of items focused on the same issue is more meaningful and reliable. Okay. Again, there are many, many online providers that support the development. They support the implementation and analysis of survey research. I mentioned to you SurveyMonkey. I've used that many, many, many times. There is one called Zoomerang. Another one is called Lime Survey or eSurvey Pro, and also Qualtrics. I've used Qualtrics before also, many times. All right, so there are several software options that exist for statistical analysis and social science research, which offers a diverse features and functionalities. Now, the most notable one that I mentioned to you earlier is SPSS. Here you see here, you have one that's called R, you have STATA, you have SAS, which is Statistical Analysis System. You have MATLAB, IBM, SPSS Statistics, JMP, you have Python. These are just a few of them, okay? Now, again, several software options exist for statistical analysis in social science research, right? The R is a free and open source programming language and software environment specifically designed for statistical computing and graphics. It is highly flexible and it has a vast array of packages for various statistical analysis. You have STATA. STATA is another software. I'm pretty sure you've heard of SAS, but these are some of the softwares that you probably came across in information systems. I'm not sure if you had it before, but anyway, I'm pretty sure some of them are mentioned in accounting information systems. SAS, again, statistical analysis system. It's a comprehensive software suite used for advanced analytics. It's used in business intelligence and data management. MATLAB is another programming software. IBM SPSS Statistics is similar to SPSS. Okay. JMP is a user-friendly statistical software which focus on exploratory data analysis, visualization, and predictive modeling. Okay, and I know you've heard of Python. Python is a versatile programming language with various libraries dedicated to statistical analysis. Python is highly flexible And it allows for customization in social science research. So your research, you're in accounting, your research is considered social science. You're conducting research in social sciences. Okay. And this is the end of the lecture. Chapter 9, this is the end of chapter 9.